Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Knowledge for Men is now doing live men's retreats in San Diego, California. Imagine 3 days of intense personal development training with 10 other like-minded men all pursuing greatness in life, business, and their relationships. You are not alone on this journey. Come to San Diego and experience The Awakening, a real cutthroat program designed to give you the tools you need to go from where you are now to where you want to be. There are only 10 spots and it's filling up quickly, so go to kfmretreat.com to learn more and apply for the program. Again, that's kfmretreat.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Stephen Alter. He is the author of Becoming a Mountain: Himalayan Journeys in Search of the Sacred and the Sublime. Stephen, happy to have you here on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. And Stephen, we start off every show with a success quote or like a saying that the guest has lived by. So what do you got for us? And then share with us why you chose that.
Well, I think if there are a lot of quotes that I have in the book, but I think the one I guess I would start with is a quote from the Buddha, which is that if you want to travel on the path, you must become the path itself. And that certainly was a guiding principle for me during the writing of the book, as well as the journeys I undertook.
Wow. It symbolizes kind of what you had to become in order to achieve that, in order to get the book going.
Well, I think it's, when you undertake a journey or a quest, set yourself a goal, you have to commit yourself entirely to that. And certainly in the case of the journeys I took, which were to a series of sacred mountains, I had to, in a sense, become a part of those mountains and get absorbed into their presence in order to understand them and to appreciate their magnitude and their beauty.
Wow. Yeah. And this gives us a good, insight into kind of who you are, but let's dive deeper. Let's go 3,000 feet deeper. Let's kind of learn more about your story of how you got started with what you do. So go ahead, take the mic, and Stephen, share with us your story.
Sure. First of all, I think it's important to understand that I was born in the Himalayas. The Himalayas are my home. I was born there because my parents, who are of American origin, were living there as missionaries. And I found myself there as a result of that, and I've spent most of my life in the Himalayas. This particular book starts really with a personal experience in 2008 when my wife and I were living in my hometown in Missouri, a small hill station in the Himalayas. And we had a traumatic experience of 4 intruders broke into our house and attacked us. We were tied up, we were badly beaten, stabbed repeatedly, and then left for dead. And following that, fortunately, of course, we both survived, but following that, there was a long recovery, both physical and psychological. And my effort in this book is to undertake a series of journeys of recovery, journeys of healing that take me back into the mountains of my birth. Those mountains are the central Himalayas, the mountains of northern India and Tibet. And I go back to 3 mountains in particular. One is a mountain called Bandarpunch, which is associated with the Ramayana epic and the mythology associated with that. The second is Nanda Devi, which is the mountain goddess who shares her name with the mountain. And the third is Mount Kailash, which many people consider the most sacred mountain in the world. It lies in Tibet. So as a process of overcoming the trauma and discontentment, anxiety, anger, all of those things that came out of that attack, I took a sequence of journeys back to these mountains. And the book really tells that story. The book tries to, in a sense, reconnect with the mountains of my birth. Because one of the things that happens when you have such a violent attack, any act of violence leads to a kind of alienation. It separates you from who you think you are. And for me, the Himalayas have been so much a part of my identity that this was an effort to reconnect, to go back to those mountains and say, yes, this is where I belong. Because there were very strong compulsions to leave after something as violent as that.
How did you overcome that initial resistance, and what were you feeling as you first arrived back to that place?
It was very difficult. I mean, both my wife and I had been badly injured. I wasn't able to walk for over a month, and because I'd been stabbed about 8 times in my legs, and the physical ability to move was something that was a challenge in and of itself. But there was also the psychological trauma of being attacked, being stabbed, having a knife at your throat, and all that kind of thing. So, in a sense, what I was dealing with was trying to ask myself, okay, I've lived through this. Now, where do I walk? And as a writer, what do I write? Because those were the two sort of fundamental questions for me. And as I set myself the goal of walking to a hill very close to our home called Flag Hill, which the Tibetan community reveres, and they tie Tibetan prayer flags there. And when I got to the top, I could see the high Himalayas across from me. And I thought to myself, I have to keep going. And so these journeys really are from that point onwards, when I carried on into the mountains and searched for the sacred, but also for the sublime, which I can define in more detail in a few minutes, but basically looking for some sort of meaning in those mountains that would also make me feel as if I had recovered and reached a point of completion there.
So what were you doing? Were you with people? Were you in temples? Like were you climbing the mountains?
I was trekking along, in most cases, along pilgrim trails. These were paths that pilgrims have used for centuries that take them back to either the sources of rivers or to temples high up in the mountains. And so I approached it as a pilgrim. Now, the one thing that I should clarify is that I'm an atheist. And as an atheist, I have a fairly generous definition of the sacred, in the sense that I include a lot of things that lie outside of the walls of temples, churches, mosques, and so on. And I find sanctity mostly in nature. So what I was often searching for was those places in the mountains, those wild and untouched places that I feel contain an element of spirituality. And I don't think there's any contradiction really between being an atheist and finding spirituality. You find it in places where, doctrine, dogma, deities, and so on don't exist. And yet it's something that moves you, it's something that draws you, and it's something that inspires you.
Wow. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from that?
Well, there are lots of lessons. I would say there wasn't one big lesson.
Right, okay.
I think that there was one mountain that I attempted to climb, Bandarpunj, and it's about 21,000 feet, so it's a major mountain. I had done lots of trekking, but I'd never, tried to get up into ice and snow as I did in this series of climbs. And so I attempted that mountain twice, and it was a difficult experience on many different levels. The first time I went with a group of about 17, 18 people, and we set off for the summit. And as I was approaching base camp, I received a wireless message from my wife saying that my father was dying. So I had to make a choice, and I chose to turn back. The others went to the top and succeeded. 3 years later, I went back to that same mountain and tried to climb it again. I couldn't make it to the top because the glaciers had broken up, the weather turned bad, and again I had to turn back. So the lesson for me in both instances was that success isn't really reaching the top. Success could be reaching the top, but certainly for me, success was making the right choices, the right decisions. And I think in each case, I made the right decision. I came back because of my father's death. I came back the second time because the obstacles were too great, and I really didn't have the skills and the courage to go on.
Okay, so what I'm getting is success. You said it's about making the right choices. So it's like living to fight another day.
Well, I think living to fight another day, I think also when you're in the face of something that is as extreme and, so huge as a mountain, and you start climbing that mountain, from a distance you look at it and you say, I think I can do it. But when you get onto that mountain and you really realize how small you are and what a minuscule piece of that larger mountain you are, you understand that really coming to terms with that mountain is more a matter of absorbing yourself into that presence, understanding that you are just a small piece of a much larger landscape. Gives you a sense of fulfillment, gives you a sense of reconciliation, and I think certainly for me was part of that process of healing, in the sense that at a certain point I thought to myself, this is not some heroic quest. I'm not going to go and plant a flag on the summit and so on and so forth. I'm really here just because I want to understand this mountain, become a part of it. And another quote that I give you is from a mountaineer named Tom Longstaff, who was one of the early Himalayan explorers. And he has a wonderful quote from his memoir that says, "To know a mountain, you must sleep upon it." And I think that is a very powerful idea, the idea that as you sleep upon that mountain, your dreams, your desires, your expectations, and your fears all become a part of that landscape. And that really goes to the heart of what I'm trying to get across in this book.
Mm-hmm. Is the mountain a symbol for challenge and adversity?
I think so. I think a mountain can be a symbol. It symbolizes all kinds of things for different people. It can become a deity, it can become a goddess, it can become so many things for people. But I think for many people, particularly from the West, people that see themselves as alpinists or mountaineers, it is ultimately that challenge, in the sense that this is something so big and so difficult that I'm going to overcome it. And I admire mountaineers. I think mountaineers and rock climbers do spectacular things, and they do things that I could never do. But at the same time, I found that was not the path for me. The path for me on the mountain was certainly to approach it, to circle it, to climb upon it, and yet not necessarily to say that by reaching the summit, I'm going to achieve everything that I hope for or that I dream of.
Wow. Can you give us a time frame of when this happened?
Sure. I live in the Himalayas, so my home is there, and I look out. I live at about 7,000 feet, the first range of the Himalayas. And these journeys took place over a period of about 4 years, from 2008 until, just last year when I did the last of my treks that I describe in the book. So it was over a span of 4.5 years. The journeys were not continuous. They didn't go in a straight line. And I broke them up with periods in between when I was reading and writing and putting the book together. But basically, it took place over the last 4.5 years.
Got it. I didn't realize that you were living in the... I didn't know that it was Himalayas.
Sure.
What is it like to live there in the Himalayas? And what is it like for you when you come or visit a Western society, being from and having lived there still?
Sure. Well, I go back and forth between cultures with a certain, I wouldn't say dexterity, but certainly with a certain fluency, simply because that's what I've been doing all my life. My ancestry certainly links me to the United States and to Europe, but the Himalayas are my home. That's where I was born. That's my birthplace. That's my birthright in that way. And so that I don't think I ever completely detach myself from the Himalayas. Even when I'm here, I'm sitting at the moment in Brookline, Massachusetts, and yet at the same time, there is a connection to the Himalayas. Those are really my compass. That's what points me in the right direction. And it's my point of reference, really, in that way. And certainly I come to the United States. I'm very happy here. I'm comfortable here. I've lived here for stretches of time. And yet I'm always drawn back to the Himalayas, which is where I grew up and where I feel most at home.
I get it. What is daily life like living in the Himalayas? Like, am I thinking that it's just completely different, or is it? I'm thinking that you're like a dweller in the mountains, and
I'm not living in a cave.
There's a cave, and there's swords,
sticks, and twigs.
Yes, that's how I'm picturing it. And you have
life is somewhat the same as it would be almost anywhere.
Right.
We live in a very comfortable house. We live a privileged life in an old British bungalow that was built in 1840, and we have friends and family around us. We have 3 dogs that live with us, and so on a day-to-day basis, our lives are fairly straightforward and perhaps even mundane. As a writer, I stick to routine. I write every morning and, regiment my life much as I would almost anywhere in the world. But I think the thing that makes it different is the fact that I can walk out my door and within 2 minutes I can be staring up at mountains that are 21, 22, 25, 26,000 feet high, and those lie only, 30 or 40 miles away as the crow flies. So their presence is something that really, underscores the fact that I'm in a very, very special place.
I get it. Yeah. It's your home, and you feel at peace there, is what I'm getting.
I certainly feel at peace, but I think that it's something that, for many years I took it for granted in the sense that it wasn't something, people would say, wow, you live in a beautiful place, you live in a strange place. And it didn't seem particularly strange to me. And the beauty was something I took for granted. But I think following this attack, and as I came to terms with that, I realized really how different this place was. And there were moments, certainly after it, that I thought to myself, I need to get out of here and go someplace that's where I don't feel threatened, where I don't feel afraid. And over the course of the last 5 years since that attack, I've sort of come to terms with that. I certainly don't feel in danger there anymore, thanks partly to our 3 dogs, but also to a sense of having reconciled myself to this was an incident that happened. It's not likely to happen again. This is really where I belong.
Wow. I could only imagine what it would be like to have to go back and revisit that. How have you been able to, I guess, overcome that challenge of that incident? I'm sure it comes up again and again, but how do you deal with that and move on from something like that? Or do you move on from something like that?
Well, I don't think you ever completely move on from that. I mean, having a knife at your throat is something I don't think you ever forget. Right. And I'm not making light of it. It was genuinely a terrifying experience. But at the same time, I guess for me, one of the things that has helped a great deal is to keep talking about it and to keep telling that story. And the book tells that story again and several times during the course of the narrative. And I think that if you keep everything bottled up inside of you, it tends to lead to an awful lot of anxiety and depression and so many other things that all of us experience at one time or another in our lives. And yet, if you're able to tell the story, if you're able to explain it, each time you tell it, you sort of peel away a layer of the puzzle or the mystery of that experience. You never actually get to why did this happen and why did it happen to me? But at the same time, you're able to uncover something of the meaning and the personal significance of that experience.
Seems like that's a very big lesson that you've learned there, and it's really impactful for us listening here. Now, Stephen, I have something called the knowledge round, so I'm just going to ask you some rapid fire questions here. So, are you ready for the knowledge round?
I'll do my best.
We were all born completely unique. Your DNA has never occurred in the past and will never occur again in the future. This fact makes you unique, and there's a purpose behind this. There's a reason behind all of this. You have some great purpose that you need to fulfill for being here. And it's a shame if that purpose never comes alive and it goes into the graveyard, the richest land in the world. Don't let that be you. Create the life of your dreams, break through and reach your full potential. Check out how my retreats can transform your life and light a fire inside of you to go after your dreams and become the best man that you can be. Go to kfmretreat.com to learn more and apply. Again, that's kfmretreat.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. The first question I have here, Stephen, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling lost or unsure of what they should do with their life, maybe unsure of their purpose?
I think the best advice I can give to anybody in that situation is to do something physical. I think sitting at home worrying about it or puzzling over it and all of that is fine, and that helps. But get out and take a walk. I find walking, and through the course of my book I talk about this, walking is something that releases your mind and allows you to sort of think of other possibilities that would never have occurred to you before.
I get it. Can you name a person who's had a tremendous impact on your life, like maybe a mentor? How has this person impacted your life?
Well, I could name dozens of them, but I guess the person I would probably pick first would be my father, who was also born in the Himalayas and grew up there and chose to go back there. And his connection to the mountains was certainly as strong as mine. And throughout these journeys, I was thinking that one of my great disappointments was that when I came back, he had died very early on in this set of journeys, and I wasn't able to tell him that I'd made it here or look what I saw or there. There was a mountain that he and I had both talked about, but I had been able to actually stand in front of it. So my father was someone who loved the Himalayas. He was born in the Himalayas just like I was. And I think his connection to the mountains really is what gave me the assurance to say, yes, this is where I belong too.
Very powerful. And on your journey, and I assume living in the Himalayas, you read a lot of books. What would you say are your 3 most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and explain why?
Well, I have so many books in my study that they're all stacked one on top of the other, so it's hard to pick any of them. But picking a recent book that I think was wonderful, Robert Macfarlane's Mountains of the Mind, which is a book about climbing, but it's also about the concept of mountains as it informed modern thought and both scientific as well as philosophical. Mountains of the Mind by Robert Macfarlane is truly a spectacular book, and one that I recommend to everybody. The other book, again, I'm going to pick mountain books for the moment, but Into the Silence, which is a book by Wade Davis about the early Everest expeditions, and particularly the expeditions in which George Mallory took part, and the final expedition in which he disappeared on Everest. Into the Silence is probably, to my mind, the best historical account of mountaineering, certainly in the last 20 to 30 years. For a third book, I don't know. I'll pick something completely different. A book that I read just a few days ago. It's a novel by William Maxwell called "So Long, See You Tomorrow." It has nothing to do with mountains, but it's a wonderful account of a young boy growing up in rural Indiana, and yet he is taken over by all of the uncertainties of adolescence. And it's a book that has murder in it. It has a book that has sex in it. It has everything. And yet it's all condensed within 130 pages. An absolutely wonderful novel that makes you look at the world through different eyes.
Well, I'll have to definitely check out some of those books. Those are new books to my Amazon wish list as we speak. Now, Stephen, scenario here for you. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
60 seconds.
Yes. The clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking, yeah. I would tell him to do almost exactly what I've done. Marry the same woman. Take the same journeys. Perhaps drink a little less.
Yeah.
That, I think, would probably be my strongest advice to him, though I'm sure he probably wouldn't take it. But I would tell him to go the same route I did. Writing is a good profession. It's a challenging profession. You never know where your next dollar's coming from, but or who your next reader is going to be. But I would advise my 20-year-old self to stick with it there.
Yeah, I like that. And now, reflecting back on what you have learned coming back to the Himalayas and now living there and written this book, what would you say is your philosophy on, let's say, life and success?
Well, life and success, you're asking the big questions, and I tend to sort of try to break those questions down into smaller questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
If you, in terms of life, is it life as you lived it? Is it life as you wish you'd lived it? Is it life as somebody else has lived it? I think for me, it's seizing those moments that meant the most to you. It's not necessarily, people talk of seizing the day, but I think a day is too big a span to really seize. But it's those moments where something really meant something to you, whether it was a connection with a person, maybe a conversation you had with somebody, maybe it was a kiss, maybe it was a flash of something that you saw at the side of a car, and committing that to memory. I think is very important. I think too often we take for granted that we're going to remember something. And for me, I think it's absolutely essential to say, that is something I'm going to remember. And by remembering it, I give it meaning, I give it significance, I give it importance, and I hold on to it, or at least I try to hold on to it. The second piece of it is, and now I'm speaking more as a writer, is to take those memories, those things that I've held on to or grabbed a hold of at some point, and then combining them with imagination. And I think that, again, if there's a lesson I have that I've learned and that I would hope I could pass on to my students or to others, is that take those memories and mix them up with your imagination and see what stories you can tell. And the stories really are that wonderful combination of memory and imagination. And for any writer, that's the raw material out of which you create fiction, and in many cases, nonfiction too.
That was a good blend of, you broke it down and kind of took it in different directions. And I found that really, really useful. So, that's going to conclude the knowledge round there, Stephen. So what's really exciting you today in this moment?
Well, I guess for me, the exciting thing is that a book that I've worked on for 5 years has finally been published. And the fact that it's now out there and readers can pick it up and appreciate it or not appreciate it, whatever their response might be. But at least it's out there. In a sense, my story is told. And Becoming a Mountain is a book that is deeply personal. And so for me, there's perhaps, I've written 15 books over the course of 30 years. And so this isn't the first time I've been published. But at the same time, this one is so intensely personal that I have a lot invested in it. And I'm just hoping that people read it with a sympathetic eye, but also with an eye and an ear to some of the ideas that it contains. And I hope, if nothing else, at the end of it, that they gain a greater appreciation for mountains, mountain culture, mountain landscapes.
All right. Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your story here and being vulnerable on this Knowledge from Men podcast. So guys listening, his book, you can find it on Amazon. It's Becoming a Mountain, Himalayan Journeys in Search of the Sacred and the Sublime. Do you want to plug yourself for anything else if you have a website?
Well, the only other thing I would say is that there is a website, becomingamountain.com. That's all one word, becomingamountain.com. And that has more details on the website as well as events that are coming up in the near future. I'm going to be speaking in Boston tomorrow on the 19th, and in Seattle, Portland, and in Boulder. So anyone who's nearby and interested is more than welcome to come to those. And all of that is on my website, becomingamountain.com.
All right. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that with my community. I'll be sure to check out the book when it comes out, but we'll leave you here. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge from Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.